Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from Mason Works Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone today with my friend, Mark Anthony. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Kathy, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, every time I say your name, I want to say Hail Caesar or something. Those...
It's been a great name because between Cleopatra,
Ooh.
Jennifer Lopez, everybody remembers it.
Well, the other thing that I want everyone to know about you that I really enjoy you, and I'm so excited to have you on the show because you are a psychic lawyer, and what I love, and you are really good as a medium. You can work a room and start popping things out for people, and everyone, it's right on. It's right on. So what I'd love to do is ask you, I know that you had a you had come from 4 generations of psychics. So could you start there so people get a feeling for this is real?
Yeah, this is absolutely real. My dad was a Navy SEAL. And my mom was a commercial illustrator and designer, and she was in the fashion world and working for this high-end department store called Kresge's in North New Jersey. And so my dad gets out of the Navy and he's at a USO dance, and he said he spotted, and it's funny to hear the way my father, both my parents have transitioned. My dad said, I saw this foxy looking babe and I had to go talk to her. And it was my mom. And he thought that she was probably like 30, because what it was, being the fashion industry, she was dressed to the nines, because mom said, well, yeah, I got the employee discount and all the good stuff. And they started talking, and she said that from the moment I met your father, there was just this connection. And so they dated a number of times. And eventually my mother said, there's something I have to tell you about me. And she tells my dad, his name was Earl, she goes, Earl, I see spirits. And he goes, oh my God, I do too. and I did the research, and it goes back at least 4 generations. You know, I say that I'm a 4th generation because that's as far back as I could go. And I've tracked these abilities into the 1890s on both sides of the family. And my father's family was very waspy. They were from Pennsylvania. And my great grandfather was on my father's mother's side, was a Baptist minister, and even founded this Baptist church. But they were Northern Baptists. I mean, you know, they were not big on the hellfire and brimstone, more on the spiritual aspects. But I discovered that not just my father, but his sister Marjorie, he had 3 sisters, and Marjorie and he were the psychics. His mother Isabel and her mother Grace all had mediumistic abilities. Wow. But they kept it quiet because, you know, it was just not discussed. Okay. And my dad said it used to scare him because when he was a little kid, they lived in this big house, and he used to have to go down and stoke the furnace and shovel coal to put it in the furnace. And he'd hear these voices, one in particular that would talk to him, and it really used to scare him. And he realized that going around saying that you hear voices was not a good thing. So he kept it to himself. And every Thursday afternoon, Dad said that my mom and Marjorie said they're having the ladies over for bridge. Well, one Thursday he got home from his work early. He was probably 12 or 13, and they had this parlor, and he was listening through the doors. They weren't playing bridge; they were doing readings.
Oh, cool!
And Dad, you know, so and ladies would come over, and they're shh, you know, don't tell our husbands, don't tell anybody. And so Dad, you know, confronted his mom and Marjorie, and then said, "Well, I hear these too, so let the cat out of the bag." Okay, let's go to my mom's side of the family. They're from Italy. And my great grandmother, Giovanna, she came over from Italy, In fact, in 2016, PBS did a special called The Italian Americans.
Oh.
It was a two-part, it was like, I think it was like 4 hours long. Anyway, they did an entire segment on Giovanna, and they referenced her abilities as the woman who knew things. And so, yeah. And so in North Jersey and the New York City area, people would come to her for her advice and wisdom. And when ships that would bring young nuns, novitiates, to the States, she would house them and counsel them until they could be, assigned to a convent. And she was treated with respect and obeyance that would have been due to a mother superior of a convent, And in both of my books, my first two books, Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity, there are stories about Giovanna and her abilities. And so this runs through the family, and it's what's known as a recessive genetic trait. For example, it's genetic whether or not you're going to be right-handed or left-handed. 90% of the people in the world are right-handed, meaning the recessive trait, one that can skip a generation or two, 10% are left-handed. But when you get two parents with the same recessive trait, then the likelihood of one or more of the offspring having that trait increases exponentially. And so here I am.
So did they encourage you? I mean, your father was aware, and he must have been encouraged, or at least nurtured through it.
There's more to the story on that. Okay. So when I was about 3.5, I started talking to people. Now, that's not unusual for a toddler to have invisible friends,
right?
But for the fact that my parents could see them too. Okay. And I recall and remember mom, dad going, "Oh my God, he's got it." And mom's like, "Oh my God, he's got it." So the Italian side of my family embraced it as they called it the gift of second sight. They looked at it as a blessing from God. And my dad, I remember he said to me, "Mark, do not do that. Do not talk to people who aren't there." He said, because people who see things, others don't get taken away. Well, that really terrified me.
Of course.
And mom was like upset with him. And when I was a little bit older, and then I was 3.5, and then a couple months after that, just as I had turned 4, it was probably about a year. I was about just past being 4 when I had my NDE. But I remember when my dad sat me down and he said, "I didn't mean to scare you." He said that I'm trying to protect you. And he said, "You can talk about this all you want to your mother and me, but don't talk about it to people outside of the house because they won't understand." What I discovered later in life is I never met his sister, Marjorie. She passed and before I could ever meet her. When she was in her, I guess, probably early 30s, she's got these premonitions and visions. And unfortunately, she married this guy who was a religious fanatic. Okay. I'm not even going to call him a zealot. He was a religious nut. And he didn't like her ability. And he worked at a steel plant in Pennsylvania. I think it was in Harrison, Pennsylvania. And he was getting ready to go to work one day. And Marjorie said, she said, "I have this terrible pain in my stomach." She goes, "You can't go. And she begged him, "Please don't go. Something horrible is going to happen." And they had an argument, and he finally said, fine. I'll just indulge this." So he stays home from work. And then that day, a crane was lifting thousands of pounds of steel beams, and the cable snapped, and it crushed the machine shop that he worked in, and it killed everybody in it. So it reasons to conclude that he would have been killed. One would think that he would have been grateful, but he felt that demons were coming to her and that this was demonic. And so he had her involuntarily committed to a mental institution. And literally these guys in white coats, because my parents were visiting for the weekend, and that they had this house on a lake. These guys in white jackets came, forcibly removed her from her home, put her in a straitjacket, took her to a mental institution and subjected her to electroshock therapy
Oh my
for a
God.
period of 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
And when I discovered this, I was so sick. I was just sick to my stomach over this. And my mother would never have anything to do with Marjorie's husband again.
Right.
She said, Earl, that's it. She goes, this guy is an idiot, and he's a fanatic. And the fascinating thing, though, Kathy, is my Aunt Marjorie comes to me all the time. And in my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency, I mention how she comes to me at a very, very important point. And I'm not going to give away any spoiler alert.
Ooh, I have to read this one. I haven't read this book. Darn it.
Yeah, and yeah, this is my latest book. It's called The Afterlife Frequency: The Scientific Proof of Spiritual Contact and How That Awareness Will Change Your Life. But in my book, Evidence of Eternity, I go into the story of what had happened to Marjorie. So I'm a little boy, I'm 5 years old, and I'm starting first grade, and I was going to Catholic school. And I remember Dad saying, remember, talk to Mom and me about this, but nobody else. And I figured, Catholic school, angels and saints and all these entities. And it's like, okay, I figured out real quick, don't say a thing.
Right. Because you have to go through Jesus or them to get that awareness, not you. Right.
And that is with all due respect to people of faith, because I do believe that religion plays important functions. Yes. Because the teachings of all the great spiritual leaders are all about peace, love, understanding.
Exactly.
They are not to be used to justify anger, bigotry, hatred, and violence, which sadly, that's what humans do, and they warp things to their purposes. But what people need to understand, and what a lot of faiths do embrace, is that you don't need a book or a building or a congregation to talk or to connect to God. But if you feel that you need the sense of community and the guidelines and the guidance, there is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that.
Right. Well, but it's interesting how many people I talked to that they did have like a religious background, which I think all Western civilization is based on the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. If you want to understand our civilization, you really, especially all art forms. So you really need the culture of it. But again, what it is that you're breaking through to a new level of relationship with that source. And that's what actually, by you creating this relationship with people, the unseen world, you're helping people create a relationship with that higher realm, I think.
I think so. I believe so. And, what I tell people is that, because people say, what you're doing is demonic. It's a demon impersonating a loved one. And it's like, okay, somebody, people pull that on me. And it's like, if that's the case, then I go into lawyer mode. If that is the case, why would a demon, number one, want you to believe that God exists, heaven exists, that essentially the teachings of Jesus are absolutely true, and the teachings of all the great leaders, spiritual teachers are true? And why would they deliver messages of love, healing, and resolution? And why would they say that the loved one in spirit is in the white light and surrounded by loved ones? That doesn't sound very demonic. Okay. To me, if it was demonic, they'd be saying, yes, your loved one is in misery and suffering, or that there is nothing. There's nothing but a void. And, so, and once again, people fear what they don't understand. My very ignorant uncle by marriage feared his wife's ability when she had this beautiful gift that saved his life. But because it didn't fit into his very constricted and narrow religious beliefs, people fear and then demonize what they don't understand. Right.
Well, it's a superpower. I mean, that's what the thing is that those hero movies that everybody has a superpower. We all do. It's, are you brave enough to use it? Are you brave enough to break out of the shell and commit to refining it, which you have? Yeah, I mean, you really are good. So you can see people that have passed. Can you see angels too?
Yes, I've communicated. Well, there's a lot of non-human spiritual intelligence on the other side, and when you say that, people start going to, but it's everything that is alive has an energy field.
Right.
Energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. My book, The Afterlife Frequency, delves very, very heavily into explaining this. And I've communicated with a lot of animals: dogs, cats, horses, gerbils, bunnies, birds. I even communicated with a bear one time. That was interesting. And I've also encountered what you and I would call angels. Particularly, I think the first time that I was cognizant of encountering them was during my NDE when I was a toddler. And it's funny because I called them the light people. They look like the outlines of people, but translucent, and they glow like from the inside out. And very positive, very loving, very warm. And I could see where people get the idea throughout the centuries that angels have wings, because they have a humanoid appearance and there's this light projecting out, which could be interpreted as wings. Mm-hmm. And so then when I started really working with my ability and communicating with people, okay, you get, spirits, Cousin Gertrude, Uncle Charlie, and all these people, and they have very human characteristics. And then it was the light people. And then I realized that is what you and I would call angels.
So do you find that the angels follow? Okay, so we have a group of beings that support us here, and right. I feel them. I'm aware of them. I guess I see them here. I don't see them like you see them, but I feel them, and they talk, and I love it. I mean, I love it. What do they follow you into the next phase? I mean, it's I consider these guys my team. So does my team stay with me to the next phase?
When you say the next phase, define what you mean by that.
Well, after you die, which I don't know what to call it, except, going into the light, but it's inside, so many people are leaving the planet right now. I guess I'm not sure what to call anything, but it's I used to figure it's just you lose this meat suit, and if you choose, you get another more light, hopefully with longer legs.
Yeah, I want the Ryan Reynolds washboard upgrade package next time. I mean, it's funny because we use our bodies like they're cars. And we have to realize that we're not the car, we're what's inside of it. And I like the way you said meat suit, because I always got a big kick out of that description. There's a lot of debate about spirit guides and spirit helpers. My understanding is that, okay, so here you are in the middle, and then there is a group of spirits that are with you pretty much all the time. And my understanding is that there's one main spirit guide. You can call this a guardian angel. It doesn't have to be an angelic entity. It could be a human spirit. But then the other spirits are helpers, and they can change over time.
Right.
Okay. So you got one that's with you from womb to tomb. All right. And then you got these other entities, like they may come in and be with you at a certain developmental point of your life, maybe to help you learn as a child some coping skills and scholastic endeavors, or maybe later on you're on this soul searching quest, and they may be there, or you have health issues, And so that's why these can come in and out. And then the spirits are never alone. They're energetically interconnected to other spirits, which are connected to other spirits, which are connected to other spirits, which is what I have called in my books the collective consciousness. And that's why when people lose a loved one, they're always afraid, is he or she alone? Spirits are never alone. And the analogy that I like to use is that think of your soul as a drop of water. And that when we die, that drop of water leaves the host, which is our brain, and plunges into this eternal sea of souls. And so that's why when they disconnect, and I call that the collective consciousness disconnect, they can disconnect. I mean, they're not really disconnected, they just adjust their frequency so that we can perceive them or at least get messages from them. But they're always interconnected with that. And you know, Kathy, that's one of the things that all of us who have had an NDE, people who study spirituality, interconnectedness, every single religion, every single NDE, everyone talks about interconnectedness. And when you start working with this and interfacing with spirits, sure, you know, Uncle Bob and Aunt Martha come through, but they're never alone. And yet they're connected to a much greater whole.
Well, do you think that you replay the scenario? There's a woman named Dr. Sue Morter, who's a chiropractor and has this wonderful process called BEST. And she says that before you come down, it's like, she says it's like a bus stop. And everybody hangs out in the bus stop and says, okay, I want to do this time. Will you be my father? Will you be my sister? Will you kill me? Whatever the scenario is. Do you think that's true, the way that it works, that this soul family reunites in the next phase?
Oh, you definitely see your loved ones who have transitioned before what you and I call death. I like the bus stop analogy. I've always called it like everybody in your life are like actors in a play,
right?
And so as we go through the play, there are scenes and then there are acts, and some spirits or some people come in certain scenes and then others leave at other times. And then when we reincarnate, it's like all the actors are back, but they're all given different parts now.
Right. Isn't that
my understanding of it? And so I remember my mother, who believed very much in reincarnation. We were eating dinner one time, and she said, "Well, maybe next time, your father would actually be my son." And I made a joke. I go, "Dad, now you'll see what it's like." And so, and I was just kidding, I was just teasing because, but that didn't go over very well. So it didn't mean anything. It was just funny, and of course, Dad was laughing, but that's one of the things. No matter, even though I can communicate with spirits, and even though I can connect with my parents, we grieve because we miss their physical presence.
Mm-hmm.
I really miss every Sunday. I used to go to breakfast with my parents.
Yeah.
And it was something I'd always looked forward to. And yeah, maybe sitting there and eating some eggs and toast and drinking some coffee and talking, and then we'd go our separate ways for the rest of the week. God, I miss that.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the next question I have for you is, when I've watched you work a room, it's been amazing. Have you seen where people actually call in this specific person, or is it really up to the other side who wants to communicate?
That's a great question, and it's so complicated. I don't know if there's one answer.
Okay.
Because no, it's what it is. There's always people that, when I get in front of a group of people, everyone's like, they want their loved ones to shove everyone else's loved ones out of the way and make a beeline right for me. And I get it. Okay. But sometimes overly desiring something creates a barrier.
Oh,
I
makes
get some
sense.
people that come in, I want, I want, I want. And what's happening is they're putting angst into the energetic field and unintentionally blocking it. What I do is I open up my brain to higher frequency. And in both Evidence of Eternity, my last book, and in my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency, I talk about collective consciousness communication. So if I'm in front of a room and there's 100 or 200 or however many people in it, the other side knows that I have a limited, finite human brain. But they're capable of collective consciousness communication, which means, let's say I'm doing a reading and I get pulled to you and your Aunt Martha comes through and I start giving you messages for Aunt Martha, but then there's 10 other people in the room and those messages start resonating with their heartstrings, and all of a sudden it starts making more and more sense to these other people. This is not a fluke. This is not a coincidence. This is collective consciousness communication. So
Oh,
even though you're the one that I'm talking to, they're capable of sending a tremendous amount of information through me. Let me give an example. I was doing an event and all of a sudden, there's about 100 people in the room and I kept getting Paisley, Paisley. And I said, Paisley, thyroid and pancreas. 3 hands go up. And I said, please stand. And the first lady said, I was at the mall today and for some reason, I just felt I needed to buy this paisley skirt that I'm wearing. So I walked into Macy's and bought it. And you said, thyroid. She said, I was just diagnosed with thyroid issues. Then this gentleman stood up, said, my father died recently and I was going through his things yesterday. And for some reason, I really wanted his paisley tie. And he said, and I just was told that I have issues with my blood sugar, which is pancreas. And then the third lady said, my grandmother's name was Paisley and she died from pancreatic cancer.
oh my gosh.
Okay, so this is collective consciousness communication. The Paisley came through, and luckily, the people there, they were really, really good. They all acknowledged that, and so once that collective of people stood up, then I was able to deliver the messages to each of them. Does that make sense?
Yes. So do they usually give you and something somebody only the other person will know as an identifier, and then give a message like I love you and you're doing great and any of that stuff? Like
Yeah,
I
I smile because
see you didn't fold your underwear the way I taught you.
well, they will bring up some interesting things. All right. This didn't make it in my new book because it happened after I finished writing it. But there's other things in the new book that are just as potent. But I was doing an event, and it was it's what we call light circle. And in a light circle event, there's no more than 10 people, and then that way I can guarantee that everybody gets a reading. And there was this woman there, and her father's spirit comes through, and I said, and I've been doing this long enough, Kathy, to where the weirder it is usually the more accurate. And I looked at her and I said, my head is filling with the image of the 7 dwarves, particularly grumpy. And and I see her jaw drop and her eyes get big, which is always a good sign when you're a medium. She goes, I have a grumpy collection. I'm like, you have a what? She goes, I collect grumpies. The dwarf grumpy. I go, is that even a thing? And everybody in the room's like, we never heard of that. She goes, yeah. She goes, I collect grumpy figurines and statues. I always got a big kick out of the dwarf grumpy. Well, this was coming from her father's spirit.
Yeah,
Okay.
so identical.
So he's letting her know that, he's around her and aware of what's happening. And, the skeptics are always like, you're cold reading. Really? Grumpy? Come on. If I said, oh, a puppy, you had a puppy. Everyone's had a puppy at some point, or most people have.
Yeah.
But Grumpy the dwarf?
Well, so okay, so we have this team. Well, we have collective consciousness which allows us to tap into collective things. What's the strangest reading that you've given? I mean, Grumpy can't be the strangest one.
No. I can tell you one of the most interesting ones.
Okay.
So I was on tour of upper state New York, and I was actually invited to speak at the Lilydale Assembly. But my manager, Rocky, she travels with me, and we were staying in Buffalo, New York, at this hotel. And I hear Rocky on the phone, and she's saying, "Yeah, right. Are you joking?" And then all of a sudden her eyes get really big, and she goes, "Hold on." She goes, "Mark, Shirley MacLaine, the movie star, her assistant is on the phone, and Shirley has a radio show and she wants to interview you." I'm like,
Cool.
"What?" I go, "When?" She goes, "Now." All right, like I'm gonna say no. Okay. I mean,
yeah.
And all of a sudden I get on the phone and it's Shirley MacLaine. Okay. and Shirley MacLaine, though, is a very special person. In fact, I dedicated the Afterlife frequency to Shirley MacLaine.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, she was a pioneer. She was the first major celebrity to go forward with her beliefs in metaphysics and in reincarnation. She caught a lot of flack for it. So anyway, I'm supposed to be on the phone with her for 20 minutes. And at the end of 20 minutes, she goes, "Mark, dear, I am having so much fun. Do you mind if we go longer?" And I'm like, "Well, no kidding. Yeah. And 2 hours and 40 minutes. Okay. And I'm loving it because she's asking me, and she asked really good questions, not just, what does spirits look? I mean, she was asking me really in detail. And her radio show is Independent Expressions. She's not doing it anymore, but I believe you can listen to the archived episode.
Oh, that'd be great.
So I figured, well, let me ask Shirley something, So we're talking, and I quoted something from John F. Kennedy, and she goes, "Oh, you'll have to raise the bar higher than that." And I go, "Why do you say that?" She goes, "Well, I knew him." And I'm like, "You knew JFK?" She goes, "Yeah, I used to hang with the Rat Pack. I was part of the Rat Pack." And then I'm like, "Oh my God."
She was.
Yeah, and Peter Lawford, who was part of the Rat Pack, was John F. Kennedy's brother-in-law. Right. And Shirley MacLaine was, along with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Joey Bishop, Peter Lawford,
Sammy Davis
Jr., and
Frank Sinatra. Did you say Frank Sinatra?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Frank Sinatra. and Shirley MacLaine. Yeah. And she said, I was at, and I go, "That's incredible." And then she said something about Stephen Hawking. And I go, "You met Stephen Hawking?" She goes, "He was a very dear friend of mine." And she said that I was in his office and there were two pictures behind him on the wall, one of Albert Einstein and one of Marilyn Monroe. And I said, "Well, Stephen, I get Einstein, but why Marilyn?" And she imitated him. She goes, "Her curves are more beautiful than a quantum singularity." And I said, "Well, and I started laughing, and she said that, well, she said I was at the birthday celebration for JFK when Marilyn sang the happy birthday.
Oh.
She said, but the studios used to play Marilyn and I off against each other because we'd be up for the same parts." And she said it was nasty and it wasn't nice. And Marilyn threw a fit backstage and said, "I'm not doing this. I'm not getting in that dress." And the producer said, "Well, Shirley MacLaine's here and she's your size. We'll get her to do it." She goes, "Fine, I'll do it." She went up there and she sang this, and then there's a point to the story, but
so Marilyn's going to come through.
So hold on. So Shirley said, then my big break came when I got the role in the movie The Apartment. And that movie catapulted her into a whole new realm. Yeah. And she said so a couple months later, we're at the premiere in Hollywood, and it's a really hot night, and Marilyn shows up wearing a full-length fur coat. And everybody was wondering what's up with Marilyn. And halfway through the movie, Marilyn gets up and goes out to the lobby. And Shirley said she went out there, and Marilyn was at the bar. And Shirley said, Marilyn, what's going on? And she said, Marilyn turned to me and opened up her fur coat, and she was stark naked underneath it. And she goes, Mark, now that I think about it, Stephen Hawking had a point, so I'm laughing. And I go, well, I wonder what Marilyn would think of that. And she said, well, you're the medium. You tell me. All right.
No pressure.
A little bit of pressure here. And I'm like, oh my God. And all of a sudden I start describing what who's coming through, and she sure looked like Marilyn to me. And she said, did Marilyn kill herself? And the response was no. She said, I just couldn't handle it anymore, and I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin. She said, Shirley, you could glide through a crowd with elegance, and I felt garish.
Oh.
I felt so judged. And there was something else I said, and Shirley goes, well, that is exactly something Marilyn would say.
Wow.
And then it dawned on me that I'm on the phone with Shirley MacLaine and communicating with the spirit of Marilyn Monroe. And then I said, there's another spirit here, this beautiful woman, dark hair, these incredible eyes, like they're almost like violet. And before I could say anything, Shirley goes, oh, Liz, she was my dearest friend. I'm like, I'm talking Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe. So I don't know if that qualifies for the weirdest.
Oh, that's the coolest.
But it was, I've done readings for a number of high profile and famous people. And some of the spirits that have come through just blew me away. If you'll indulge me, one more.
Of course.
I was on tour of Pennsylvania, and I was in Philadelphia, and I was on this radio show, and it was an African American show, and the host was just amazing. Everybody, I don't know if I've ever been treated so well.
Oh.
I mean, I was treated so respectfully, and the callers were just fantastic. And so I'm doing all these readings, and then the host of the show, she said when it was over, she goes, will you do a reading on me? And I said, I'd be honored to. And so I opened up the frequency, and this gentleman came through. I said, he feels like a grandfather, and he's, dark-skinned man. And I described him and how he died and what he looked like. And a couple things, she goes, well, that's definitely my grandfather. And I said, wait a second. She goes, what? I go, this is going to sound really weird. She goes, tell me whatever you're seeing. I go, I could swear Gandhi is standing next to him, Mahatma Gandhi. And so I'm expecting her to like roll her eyes, and she goes, actually, my grandfather lived in India in the 1930s, and he was very good friends with Gandhi, and he studied nonviolent non-cooperation. And my grandfather came to the United States and worked with Dr. Martin Luther King.
Perfect.
And I'm like,
yep.
I'm connecting with Gandhi. I mean, and the thing is, people say, oh, you must have Googled her. Really? If I Googled her, it wouldn't say grandfather knew Gandhi 75, 80 years ago. And here was the really, really difficult thing about that. Her grandfather gave me a message to the effect that I will be there for you. And I get very emotional.
Because that means she was going to pass.
2 weeks later, I got a call from the station. She dropped dead of a heart attack right out of the blue. And she wasn't even 50.
Oh my God.
And then it made sense. Her grandfather said, I will be there for you. And I remember I had only met her once. And I thanked them, and when I put down the phone, I just burst into tears.
Yeah. Wow. Well, are most of the conversations at a girl, at a boy, love you very much, from the other side, or the encouraging people? They They don't nag you, right?
Well, they will certainly bring health issues and other things
Oh,
to your attention.
okay.
And the thing is, I get a lot of messages regarding people's health. And it's fascinating because in my law practice, I was a prosecutor for a while, for a couple of years. Then I went into criminal defense, and then I went into personal injury. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I've had to acquire a basic understanding of anatomy and physiology, just not just for forensics and murder cases, but also in the injury cases. And spirits know that. And so I'll be doing a reading on somebody, and all of a sudden they start giving me all this medical information about the person that I'm doing a reading for. Now, what they give me oftentimes far exceeds the scope of my basic understanding of anatomy and physiology. I mean, I've been doing readings, they start talking about genetic markers and cellular mutations and all these things that I don't know anything about. And then the people are like, oh my God, that's what I have. Or they're like, oh, I don't have that. And then I get an email saying I went to the doctor and said, well, test for this. And I tested positive for it. I've been, I go on tour, and the last time I was in Texas, this gentleman came up to me at a reading. He goes, Mark, he goes, can I shake your hand? And this is before COVID, and I said, well, absolutely. Well, why? He goes, you saved my life. I go, how? He said, I was here a year ago, and you did a reading on me and my wife at this event, and you said the spirits were telling me that I need to get into the doctor ASAP because there is a major problem with my heart. And he goes, and I didn't believe that. My wife made me go, and the doctor said, oh my God, you are on the verge of cardiac failure because he had a massive blockage. Now, if you looked at the guy, I mean, he didn't look like he had a foot in the grave. He looked healthy. And he said, thank you. And I said, I'm just the conduit. You thank God. Thank God. Okay. Because my belief, Kathy, I do believe in God. I don't believe God's an erotic white guy sitting on a throne, smiting people and casting people. That's mythology.
Yeah.
But I believe in that God is far beyond our ability to truly comprehend, and yet very simple, because it's love, light, and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that I am just a conduit, because the reason that I know that there's nothing evil about this, healing is a gift from God. Okay. And the spirits intervened to let this gentleman know that there was this horrible blockage in his heart.
Right.
The doctor said, we got it just in the nick of time. And the thing is, that's not the first time this has happened to me. I've got hundreds of accounts of this. And, it doesn't, this type of thing doesn't happen in every reading, but it's not unusual for it to happen. So yes, there's the attaboys, attagirls, I love you, I'm proud of you, I'm aware of you. But many times they're going to come in and start saying, you need to change your diet. You need to do this.
Wow.
You need to get this tested. And that's what I call spirit intervention.
Wow.
People tell me all the time, well, I'll never give up my bacon and cheeseburgers. And it's like, my job is to deliver the message. What you do with that information, that's your free will.
Right. But do you think of all the work that heaven had to do to get them to sit in that seat, in that place for you to talk to them? You just think about all of the synchronicities that had to happen for you to deliver that message. It's like, come on, you can't ignore. You can't ignore that something greater than you is supporting you and helping you.
Well, sure. And a lot of times I have absolutely no idea what the message means. People mistake psychic and mediumistic abilities for omnipresence, meaning that we're all knowing and all seeing. I have insights. I report on what is being transmitted to me. I was doing a session, it was a public venue, and this mother and her teenage daughter stood up, and all of a sudden, right out of my mouth comes, don't go to the concert. You're not supposed to go to the concert. And this girl's like, but next week I'm supposed to go to this concert with my friends. And her mother's like, you're not going. And I said, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen to the car.
Wow.
Okay. Some type of, it was well over a year later. you know, I mean, I was doing an event in the same state, and this mother and daughter walk up and they said, "Do you remember this?" And they told me that, and I was thinking, like, I remember something about it. And so this girl said, "Well, I didn't go to the concert because my mom wouldn't let me, and I called my friends, and they were driving up the interstate, and I told them that, you know, the psychic said something's going to happen to the car." So they were all freaked out, and they were going only like 50 or 55 miles an hour. Okay. She said, because normally my friend, she like floors it. She'd be going like 90. And there must have been a wreck or something before, because they ran over some debris in the road, and all of a sudden all four tires blew out, and they were stranded on the interstate for hours until, you know, they could. She said, "Mark, it wasn't one flat tire, it was four." And I'm like, "Get out of here." No, they're like, no, this is what happened. And so the spirits intervened, and they were smart enough to listen. She kept herself out of it, and thankfully she told her friends, so they adjusted their behavior to slow down, thereby, because if they had been going 90 miles an hour,
Right, they would have died.
50 is bad enough, but almost double that speed, this could have had a very different ending to the story.
Wow. So you and I met I mean, I think I've seen you work before, but I met you in person in Philadelphia at the IONS conference 2 years ago, and I got to have lunch with you.
Yeah.
And at that lunch, I asked you about UFOs. Do you remember?
I do.
Okay, so do you have any more insight? Because I just love I love all of this stuff.
Well, you know, I've always believed in UFOs. And in recent months, when the United States Pentagon comes out and says that UFOs are real, but we don't know what they are.
Right.
They must be Chinese and Russian technology, and it's
Right.
like, yeah, they don't have that technology. But I remember my dad, when he went from the Navy, he went into aerospace, an engineer and materials specialist, and he had a top secret security clearance. And I'll never forget him telling me that he was in a laboratory in the 1950s. He was young. My parents had me when they were later in life, and I was a surprise. They said that they had, you know, they had my sister and then my brother. They said they were done, and then 10 years after that, here I come, you know, the baby. And my dad said that they were growing silicon chips. He goes, "Where on earth did they get the idea for this?" And the senior vice president said, "Well, it may not be Earth. Something happened a few years back in New Mexico, and the government brought in all of us and these defense contractors to investigate." And my father was firmly convinced that the Roswell incident was not a weather balloon, as the official U.S. Air Force report, that actually an extraterrestrial vehicle had crashed, and that it gave them ideas. And Dad said within about 5 years of Roswell, the transistor had been invented. And he explained that the transistor was the greatest leap forward in electronics technology since Tesla came up with the idea of alternating current. Wow. Well, from the transistor, they made the leap to silicon chips, because apparently a transistor is essentially like a de-evolved version of a silicon chip, and much larger. So I've also on my show, The Psychic and the Doc, and on a podcast that I was working on called Destination Supernatural, I've interviewed a number of scientists, including Colonel John Alexander, who used to be the president emeritus or is the president emeritus of IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, who was head of the U.S. military's UFO project. And he's firmly convinced they're real. So when you start getting scientists, high-ranking military personnel, and now the United States government itself.
Yay.
I mean, here's the thing, Kathy. Look at the stars at night.
Yeah.
there's in our galaxy alone, what, 100 billion stars?
Yeah.
And if only 0.0001% of those is capable of sustaining life, that's a lot.
Right,
That's
right.
just our galaxy.
Okay, so but the reason why I asked the leading question was that I think there's a lot of hybrids here who might have different spiritual guides and support than your basic everyday human. And I wondered about that.
I don't have any direct proof of that.
Okay.
However,
However, I like the
However,
lawyer term.
I've done readings for a number of people, and during the reading, very unusual things started coming out. And I was doing a reading for this young man in Colorado, and his grandfather came through and I said, "It's the grays that are taking you." This kid, he was, oh, kid, this young guy, he was probably about 22, 24, and he was like perfectly chiseled. I mean, crystal blue eyes. I mean, looked like the perfect male specimen. Color drained from his face. He started shaking. He burst into tears. And he said, "They keep coming and they keep taking me." Now, he's not the first person that is an abductee. I've done a reading for Calvin Parker. Calvin Parker is considered the most credible alien abductee on record.
Oh,
He was 19 years old in Pascagoula, Mississippi, back in the 1970s.
okay.
And he's real Southern, real nice guy. And he's like, "Yep, my friend and I, we were fishing, and this thing came out of the sky." And he said, "It hit us with this light beam, and we couldn't move. And the next thing we know, these robotic things came out, took us, and they started doing all this stuff to us." I also, and I did a reading for him as well. I did a reading for Nancy Tremaine. She too is a very, very high, you know who she is? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I've done a reading for a couple other people. And there's a similarity between all of them, is they are selected because of the way their body metabolizes protein.
Oh, interesting.
And the message for this young guy was, you've got to change your eating habits, and the message came through to him what to do. So, okay, so I'm talking about protein. Well, then I was on a show hosted by Chris DiPerno.
Okay.
He's a great guy. And Chris DiPerno is with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network.
Right.
And Chris is MUFON's investigator that debriefs abductees.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I told him this. He goes, "Oh my God." I go, "What?" He said, "Spirits told you that about the protein?" I go, "Yeah." He said, "We have found in every one of the abductees that after the experience, they cannot get enough protein. They crave it." That he said one guy ripped open a package of hot dogs and ate them raw, uncooked. And so he's telling me this. He goes, "We don't know what it is, but there's something about them and protein." So I called Calvin Parker, okay, because I know him good enough to call him. And he goes, I asked him about protein. He goes, "Mark," he goes, "I cannot get enough protein." He goes, "I drive my wife crazy. So I'm always wanting burgers and steak and this and that." I go, "Were you like this before the event?" And he goes, "Well, I always like a good burger, but no." So there is some type of physiological thing that they're looking for. And there have been a number of people I've talked to. There was a mother and son I did a reading for, and during the reading, something about the UFO came through. And they said, "Oh my God, we were at this," I don't know, they were somewhere in the woods at night, and they said this large metallic object came down, hit them with a light, and then took off. And the message from the other side was they were close, but not exactly what they were looking for. I know. And so look, I know how this sounds. I mean, but on the other hand, I do communicate with discarnate intelligence. I communicate with spirits. Why would it be ridiculous to think that intelligent life forms are not visiting Earth?
Of course, of course, of course. And that's part of the evolution of our species from, I mean, how did we go from cavemen, Neanderthals to the high society or the high civilization in Egypt and Mesopotamia. I mean, that doesn't make sense that click a switch and something happened.
Yeah,
That's
we
for sure.
climbed out of trees and decided to start.
No, we got out of our cave, said, hey, let's build me a pyramid. Anyway, well, I want to let everyone know about you and the Ions event that's coming up in September, because you're a keynote on Friday night. And I don't know if you get to speak past that, but do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing at the Ions event? The event is September 1st through the 5th, and you can find out all about it at virtualconference.ions.org. But take it away, Mark.
Well, on Thursday, September 2nd, I believe it's 2:30 Eastern, I will be conducting an afternoon of spirit communication. And, you know, it's funny, since COVID, I've been doing a number of Zoom conferences where there's several people there, and I'm able to connect with their spirits just as easily as I can in a room full of people. And that's because, as I explain in my book, The Afterlife Frequency, spirits being pure energy move at the speed of light, which is the same speed as the computer and phone calls and electricity. And then my keynote speech is Friday, September 3rd. I believe it's 8 p.m. Eastern, which would be 5 p.m. Pacific. Right. The talk I'm giving is called the NDE Zone. The subtitle is Connected by the Light from the Cosmic to the Subatomic. And what I'm presenting, I'm exploring the similarities between the different forms of interdimensional communication. Now, I call what I do as a medium interdimensional communication, because we live in this dimension, which I call the material world, yet I am communicating with the afterlife frequency, which is connected to the other side dimension. But where does this happen? It happens in the zone in between, but it's not just limited to mediumship. It also includes, that's what happens during a near-death experience, during a shared death experience, during a deathbed vision, out-of-body experience, and when people have a visitation from spirits. So that's what the gist of my talk is. And I'm going to be introducing some, not all, but a few of the theories from my new book, The Afterlife Frequency. And I'm very excited about giving, and honored to give this presentation. And you know, Kathy, this IONS is very special. It's the 40th anniversary of the founding of IONS.
That's right.
And IONS has brought a taboo subject shrouded in secrecy into the mainstream. And that's important, because people need to know that physical death is not the end of existence.
That's right. And the benefit of the online conference is that there's 4 separate rooms, which in a physical conference, you just have to decide where you're going to go. But on a digital recorded conference, you have 90 days to listen to the recordings if you have 2 going at the same time. So instead of watching Netflix and binging on some old TV show, you could binge watch all the IONS classes. And I have to tell you guys, I mean, I've been involved with IONS for a while. I can't get enough. This energy feels like home. It's open-hearted. It'll change the way you look at everything, because it is expansive and pure love. And the more you feed your soul with being around people that are open-hearted, the better your life will be. And listen, the more you listen to Mark, you're going to get insights in how you're going to connect with who you really are, and more of your special essence, so that you can gift it to the world. Thank you so much. I just love all of this. And I love that you were courageous enough to leave the law, your old life and join this life, because I think there's so many people that are being helped by it, especially the past year and a half, 2 years, where we had to come to grips with an invisible enemy, and that your time could be done at any time, and you had to come to grips with your fear of death. And so your work is so valuable to let people know this isn't all, folks.
No, it isn't. But while we're here, take good care of yourself.
Yeah.
And remember, your body is where you're living right now. So keep it healthy.
Yes. Yes.
And you know what? And make each day count. And by making each day count, Kathy, you know as well as I do, that doesn't always mean building a pyramid or making a movie or doing something like that. It might be spending some time with a child. It could be picking up the phone and calling an elderly person who only gets bills in the mail and nobody talks to them. It could be just being a good listener, a good parent, a good spouse, a good friend. Make each day count, because in when you transition, you're never going to, your last words are never going to be, if only I'd gone into the office more.
That's perfect. So Mark, let's let everyone know the best ways to get a hold of you, because I have a feeling that people will see you in Ions and they're going to want to have a reading or follow you on your new show. So could you share where best to find you?
Sure. Visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com, just like my book, Afterlife Frequency. And it's afterlifefrequency.com. Please sign up for my newsletter. Please, you can, there's a free resource called Grief Management, and you can find out about my books and scheduling your own personal session with me at afterlifefrequency.com.
Thank you. Perfect. And I can tell you, this is really going to be a life-changing thing for you to experience more of Mark's work. And please do yourself a favor. If you're struggling with these times and with people passing, please follow Mark's work, because I think it'll give you a whole different perspective on all of this. It's a huge blessing that what you share, Mark. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Many blessings.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.